for the Minister of Health. Minister, over 3 years ago, I first stood in this House to raise an important issue about the discrepancy between how hospices are funded in Ontario, and I've since raised this issue with your government several times, and yet nothing seems to be happening. If you look at my riding, the North End Hospice receives funding from their LHIN, while the South End Hospice has been told that the LHINs don't fund residential hospices at all. Minister, hospices are there for those that require treatment at the end stages of life. The alternative for many people is to stay in the hospital at a much higher cost. In fact, the cost can be upwards of 10 times more expensive. An intensive care bed, as you know, averages close to $3,000 per day in hospital, while a hospice bed averages between $300 to $500. Minister, you have a clear opportunity to save taxpayers some money by supporting hospices across the province. Will you do that?
Thank you. Minister of Health and Long-Term Care.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, we do support hospices across this province. In fact, we were the first government to invest in hospices, and we want to be sure that at this important moment in an individual's and their families' and friends' life, that Ontarians have dignity through their final days. And we've now committed to a palliative and end-of-life strategy, and myself, along with the Associate Minister, will be working on that as we go forward. It was referenced in our platform. As part of this plan, in fact, Mr. Speaker, we're committing to funding 20 more hospices across the province, almost doubling the number of people in Ontario who will have access to this high-quality end-of-life care. And it's important. It builds on an earlier strategy or end-of-life strategy from 2005, which at that time was a $115 million program to provide that dignity and that important support, that quality of health care to those individuals who so badly and so importantly deserve it.
That's right. Supplementary.
Well, thank you for that answer. And Minister, you might want to adjust your number. I think it's 22 of the 35 hospices that actually receives nothing from government. And the 13 that do, they receive limited funding just for the nursing and personal support costs. So all of the capital, as you know, is fundraised by the local community. And in fact, I wish you'd talk to the Central LHIN, because Matthews House Hospice in Alliston runs 4 beds. They run completely without funding at all from the government, one of the 22. And the attitude that the LHIN has taken there is, how dare you go ahead and build a hospice and not have government approval ahead of time or government funding in place. What a horrible attitude that the ministry has in terms of they should be thanking the people for raising millions of dollars, for putting the 4 beds in place, and for covering the up to $650,000 a year operating costs. And 80 people have gone through there. Average length of stay is 10 days. According to the formula, that's $2 million you save of health care dollars by supporting hospice. So will you support Matthews House?
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the member opposite. In fact, he's making a good argument for supporting what we've proposed in the budget and our platform, which is developing a specific palliative and end-of-life strategy across the province. It's important that not only the system works better, but we want an overarching provincial policy framework when it comes to this end-of-life care. It's so important that we not do it. I'm not suggesting in this instance this is the case, but it can't be on an ad hoc basis. It needs to be very proactive. It needs to engage members of the community. It needs to have a provincial policy, which is the foundation of how we engage individuals and support. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, we're investing significantly more money. It's in our platform. We'll be finding ways to implement that going ahead, and we're going to be basing it in part by a very important working group that was set up just last December, a residential hospice working group, which is consulting widely and is going to be providing us with the recommendations that we need to develop that important strategy for residential hospices as well as the other palliative care.
A new question, the member from Algonquin, Manitoulin.